don't need a high-end designer or a lot of money to get a luxe look. Be your own interior designer.
This is Affordable Interior Design, the podcast.
Here's your host, Betsy Helmuth.
My last question is from Oregon, and Heather is writing in. Hi, Betsy. You answered one of my questions recently, and I know it was good advice, but I am afraid it only left me with more questions. I want to add color to my living room, and from the pictures, you said that I was having a design style crisis. So I don't want to move forward in any direction until I have a firm idea of what that direction exactly is. I've decided to step back and start in my kitchen because that opens up to our living room. Obviously, the kitchen is less flexible because of the many elements that are already fixed. I thought if I could pinpoint my two-word phrase for that room, then it would make the living room directions so much more clear. Do they need to be the exact same phrase or just related? My problem is I'm not sure what style I'm really seeing in this kitchen either. I have lots of wood tones that warm up the space and balance all of the white. So that makes me think it's rustic. I have a natural wood range hood, although I really consider that more of an art piece than something that's rustic. The lighting feels very industrial or maybe even modern farmhouse. The metal dining chairs also feel industrial. The island chairs and armchairs have a mid-century modern line. The vertical tile I feel could be mid-century or even modern. And the rug has a tribal vibe. To me, I know you're going to suggest that under a dining table, I should not I should have a rug, but I'm having a hard time committing to one with the mini spills we experienced during dinner. Also, you had previously said the pendant lights were too low, but they are at 33 inches, which is what you suggest. We have lower ceilings, so visually that might throw you off a bit. Is there a word or a style that you feel like encapsulates my kitchen, or is that in crisis also? Would you change something out to give it a more cohesive and consistent feel? I really love my kitchen, but I want to keep an open mind so I can have a clearer vision for the rest of the house. Thank you for all your help and all your ideas. All right, I do have help and I do have ideas for you, Heather. You sent in some beautiful pictures. And guys, if you're wanting to envision the description that's Heather has shared or how I tried to describe Bobby's space, well, you'll want to go over to our YouTube channel. Affordable Interior Design on YouTube. And there you can see a video of this episode. You can see what I look like. You can see what I'm wearing now that I'm podcasting, and you can see their imagery. So it'll really help to illustrate and bring these situations to life because otherwise you've got to muddle through with my description. Even though, Heather, in your case, I think you gave a beautiful description of your fabulous kitchen. I think your kitchen is awesome. And I would not change much in here at all. There's a couple things I'm saying, of course, that I can guide you with, but overall, you have white shaker front cabinets. You've heard me describe shaker earlier in this episode. On the bottom, you have like a walnut tone shaker front cabinet. They have elongated brass pulls. Then you do have what I would definitely call a rustic hood above the range. You have subway tile that's stacked vertically, and it's like a rustic type glaze subway tile. And then on the island, you do have like this beautiful gray, very veined marble or quartz. It is gorgeous. And it is a big visual element in the space because it's also the countertop. Then for me, it's the stools that start to cause a problem. And it's the pendant lights that start to cause a problem. Now that I know that they're 33 inches from the top of the countertop on the island to the bottom of the fixture, that's good. But I think it's because the pendant itself is so tall, thus the cord is so short. I think that is actually what's causing the problem. This very short cord with this very tall glass pendant just feels a little disproportionate. Is it a huge problem? No. Is it my favorite look? No. Should you change it out? Maybe, because also you've got brass throughout this space, whether it be the faucet or those beautiful elongated pulls that make quite a statement. You've also got stainless steel appliances, which can really go with anything, so don't feel locked in. But then these fixtures are solely bronze. If they were two-tone, if they were bronze with some brass, I'd feel them. I'd be excited about them or more excited about them. I still wouldn't be excited about them because they're too tall for the space, but that's okay. Uh, but it's that you haven't introduced this bronze anywhere else. When I'm going to use two different metal finishes in a space, when I'm going to use dark as well as warm metals, I make sure to choose at least one prominent piece that features both metals, that is a two-tone piece. So that way I'm visually telling people, hey, I'm going to be mixing these throughout the space. I'm setting the rules here by giving you this prominent focal point that shows you what I'm intentionally doing, rather than randomly keeping these bronze pendants and introducing brass. The other thing I do not like in the space is that the stools are kind of a darker wood and they're right underneath this wood island. So it's wood on wood, and it's not even woods that particularly coordinate. And then the flooring is also wood, which is kind of a lighter rustic flooring. And it's just a lot of wood. Keep the lighter rustic flooring because nobody wants to change that out, but these stools are just too dark, too wood, incongruous, not working. You could paint them a color. I think that would be really fun. You could even paint them black so that something else besides these random pendants are not the only things that are black. Those are a couple of ideas of how you could reuse the stools because I do like the shape and scale of them. But I think because the flooring is so rustic, and when I say rustic, it's you can see that visible wood grain. You can see that it's kind of a natural tone. It doesn't feel overly stained like an ebony, nor does it feel like it has a colorful stain. It feels really like it's in its natural rustic state. And the hood above the range also feels very rustic, even though it is so beautiful and so powerful, but it's still beautiful and powerful in a rustic way. Rustic is definitely a style that is happening here, whether you like it or not. And rustic is happening here in a very contemporary way. But here's the thing, rustic should definitely be a through line in any space that this kitchen opens up into. But it's that secondary word, how you want to feel in the space, that might change from area to area or room to room, right? Because how I want to feel in a kitchen may be very different than how I want to feel in the adjoining living room, may be very different than how I want to feel in the adjoining family room. Ideally, they wouldn't be that much of a departure, right? The feeling words may be subtly different from room to room. Or if you want to keep the two-word phrase the exact same throughout the whole, say, bottom floor, what you would do is then use that 60-30-10, but change up the amounts. So when I'm referencing the 60-30-10, I'm talking about color palette, right? Those three Roy G. Biv colors that you're going to be using throughout the space. So maybe in the kitchen, you would use them in sort of one variation. Like let's just say we did 30%, or I'm sorry, let's say we did 60% charcoal gray. Looking at the other things that are in this space, we did 30% of like a muted magenta, or maybe it's like a burgundy. I'm trying to get a sense of this tribal rug. And then you did like 10% pops of, say, a russet orange, which I'm seeing in the living room. Okay. So say that was your 60-30-10 in the kitchen. Well, in the living room, which is adjacent, you would just mix it up. So now your 60% would be that burgundy or the magenta, whatever that vibe is. I can't really tell. Your 30% could be that charcoal gray, and your 10% could again be the russet orange. Or your 30% could be the russet orange, and your 10% pops could be that gray. So there's ways to kind of shake things up and make a space feel cohesive without making it feel identical. But I think right now, the pieces of furniture in the adjacent rooms, like the dining room, do feel totally random. There are mid-century pieces, there are industrial pieces, there are rustic pieces, there are contemporary pieces. And so we need to pick a side. And the flooring, right, that rustic wood I talked about, and the kitchen have already picked a side with the rustic. Now, rustic and industrial have a lot of parallels because you're using materials in sort of their primal state. You're not overly fashioning or carving or fancying up these materials when you're talking rustic. And that's the same treatment that the materials are getting in the industrial style. So I think the chairs really work. I think the chandelier, or I guess I should describe the chairs for those of you listening to the podcast. They're like a metal bronze chair. It's a very popular style. They used to have these chairs at Pottery Barn. They were called the Tolix chair, Tolix, but these are a very famous, popular chair. You can get anywhere from Overstock to, like I said, Pottery Barn to even Design Within Reach. And they have a very cool rustic vibe. And I think your chandelier also has a cool rustic vibe. It is all bronze. It's like a black type bronze, whereas the chairs have a warm undertone to them. It has glass as well as Edison bulbs in the chandelier. So I think it gives that vibe. Do I tend to put a chandelier that's the same texture as the dining chairs above a table? Of course, you know I don't. Because if you're a listener to this podcast, which I think you said you were, Heather, based on the confusion you had before, then you will know that I love to layer materials and make sure that when I've got one moment, and this is your dining table moment that has a wood table, metal chairs, the chandelier that I would pick would not be wood and it would not be metal. It may have small elements of those materials, but overall it would read different. Like maybe I'd use one that has a lot of crystals, right? Because then it's primarily glass. Or maybe I'd use a fabric chandelier, one that has like that fabric type shade. So that way it's more of a fabric moment, or even a colorful chandelier. There's lots of directions to go while avoiding it be primarily the texture of the chairs or the table. So here's a little bit of insight for you, Heather. I know that you may still be a little confused, but it's because the pieces you're using are confused. And it's time for you to pick a side. And the sideboard behind the dining table doesn't belong really on any of these sides. It is definitely traditional. It's super cute. I just love it. Do I love it in here? No, it's introducing yet another wood tone, and the table is yet a different wood tone. And I'm just feeling like, even though everything is nice, I enjoy each of your pieces separately, there is a lack of cohesion that concerns me. You mentioned, Heather, that me answering your question has opened up a can of worms in which you have more questions. And of course, now you know that I want you to send those questions in because the mailbag is now officially empty. A big thank you to Aton and the Embassy, who wrote our theme song. A shout out to Catherine Heller, who owns the podcast shop and is our editor extraordinaire. We also want to thank Ginny Sunasan and her team at the Savvy Podcast Agency for their help with our social, our YouTube channel, and so much more. We also want to thank Uploft, which is our parent company who supports this podcast. And lastly, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to you. Thank you so much for tuning in and for all your support.